All right, welcome back. In this part of the Photoshop tools and operations exercise number 2, we are going to look at today loading selections and quick masks. So if you remember from our last video, we had saved all of our selections that we made for each of our images. And so today we will reload those appropriately with each image. And after we reload them, we will then come in and use what's called a quick mask to refine them and trim up the edges so they look a little cleaner around the edges. So that's what we're going to work on in this video. So let's go ahead and get started. So in my layer panel over on the right side of the screen, I'm going to go to, and I'm going to first go in and I'm going to turn off all of the other layers that I'm not going to be editing in. So I'm just going to turn off my clouds. And I think what we'll work on first is the trees. So I'm going to start by turning off water, rocks, and even my person. And I'm going to make sure that my trees layer is selected. So it should be highlighted blue like this. And now we're going to go ahead and reload the selection we created for our tree. So I'm going to go up to my top menu bar and go to Select, and then go all the way down to Load Selection. Now when this pops up, we're going to go to where it says Channel, and we're going to switch it from Trees Transparency to Tree Mask. And then we will click on OK to load it up. And there it is, right back in place. Now it's good to keep in mind that that you don't change positions of imagery or anything after you've saved a selection, because the selection stays in this exact same location in your canvas. If I had moved this tree layer around inside it and then dropped this selection back on screen again, or reloaded it, it would load probably out of alignment. So always make sure that you are done moving your image around long enough to deal with this selection phase. So now that we have it loaded up, we're going to go ahead and turn on something called a quick mask for this layer to do some fine level tuning to our image. So I'm going to go over here to my toolbar on the left, and there's a button at the bottom that we can click on. Now there are always several ways that you can activate tools in Photoshop. This should just be something you should get used to quickly, that there's always like 2 or 3 ways to do the same thing. So here's the main icon that we can use for flipping our selection and turning it into what's called a mask. So let's click that button. Now notice what it's done on screen. Immediately we get results. What the quick mask shows us is everything outside of our selected area gets shown in kind of this overlaid kind of transparent red color. That red color, just as a historical note, is taken directly out of sort of early pre-press graphic printing and newspaper printing, where they would use a red acetate to put over imagery to block it out during the printing stage so that it would not be shown, so to get rid of sloppy borders and those kinds of things. So Photoshop adapted it in here for that same purpose, to help you understand visually that anything in red is not a part of your main selection area. So we're going to use that as a guideline for what we're going to do next. Now I'm going to zoom in on my screen so I can work up close. Now when you're refining, which is what we're about to do, we're going to refine this selection around the tree and tighten it up, clean it up, and make it look really good. So we're going to zoom in to do that. I always recommend that you zoom in, and I'm using the shortcut key Command plus to zoom in. You can use the spyglass over here on the toolbar to zoom in incrementally. It does not have a reverse zoom unless you hold down the Option or Alt key. Notice how the spyglass goes from plus to minus when I hold down Option. And then you can click your mouse again to zoom out. All right, but I like doing it the other way so that I leave my mouse alone for the tool that's active. So I'm going to zoom in to about 300% for this image. It should be about this size inside your canvas area, whether or not it's 300%. All right, from here we're going to work with some different tools to work with a mask. Now masking is an interesting process in Photoshop. It involves using, in terms of working with color, blocking out imagery with two different tone groups, black and white. Essentially, the basics you can understand is that black helps to block out pixel data, while white helps reveal it or make it a part of your main selection. So for our image here, anything that we can see in normal pixel tone is part of the white selection area. Anything that we see that's in red is technically a part of the black selection area. Now, if you want to see that visualized, you can also go over here to your channels panel. And if you look under channels, you should see something called a tree mask listed there. And if you click on it, it will automatically activate what the mask on its own looks like. So it sort of temporarily visualizes your black and white mask. Masks work anywhere between black and white and all shades of gray. But white gives you a pure see-through, black blocks it out completely, and then shades of gray give you kind of an in-between sort of blend of transparency. Alright. Now back to where we were. Obviously, I just lost my selection, and that's because I didn't turn this back on. There we go. Alright, so back in here, the way that we work with a quick mask to make adjustments to it is by using drawing tools in Photoshop to manipulate it. So I'm going to use the paintbrush tool inside of Photoshop to help paint in some of the areas that need cleaning up along the edge here. So painting out the white or adding back in branches and tree trunk where necessary. So let me zoom back in. And I also want to do it, I'm identifying places that I need to do it on. This is a process that is where you identify places of need. So I look along the perimeter of my object I want to cut out, and I look like to see, are there places where there's red overlapping the imagery I want to keep? If there is, I need to get rid of that. Or is there places the red is not overlapping, like if there was a white chunk of background showing here that was a part of my selection, that would be bad. So we're going to correct it, and let's go to our toolbar over here on the left, and you're going to select this icon that looks like a brush. You can also use the B key on your keyboard to activate it automatically. Okay, so we have that turned on. I think we're pretty well ready to go. And sorry, I changed this over here because I noticed it was not letting me. It was not letting me work because I had these channels and this selected, and sometimes Photoshop is very picky about the things that work or how things work. So just make sure the quick mask is active on the channels tab in case you're keeping up with that part, or in case you change that. So when you turn on your brush, it just looks like a circle cursor on screen is kind of the general default shape for the brush. You have your brush options up here at the top. Most of those we're not going to change at the moment. What we can do with the brush on the fly that you can understand is that shortcut key-wise, you can use your open and close brackets to shrink and grow the brush incrementally by pixel size, and that's how they measure the brush. When you look up here, you should notice that there is an option that looks like, at least on my screen, it shows a 5 little dot above it with a pull down. That's the pixel dimension for the brush, and the little image above it is the shape of the brush. So if I keep hitting open bracket, notice how it grows, and the pixel size grows. So that's just a visual indicator, but I would use those bracket keys to change your brush on the fly. It's much, much faster than going up here and changing the slider for it, which you have access to. You may notice, like, here's all your brush head options. Photoshop comes preloaded with a ton of stuff. So we can change the size right here by pulling the slider, and sometimes that's helpful, but you have to come up here and do it every time, and that can get really annoying when you're trying to adjust things on the fly that change shape in an instant that you may just need a smaller size in a moment, and maybe only for like one little area. So you can adjust that here. There is one feature in here that is good to know about called hardness. And that actually allows you to adjust how hard-edged or how soft-edged your paint work looks. So it can make it look kind of blurry along the edges or kind of a blend or like a really hard line. So I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So first off, what we're going to do is I'm going to adjust my brush to where it's a little smaller or maybe even a little bit bigger than this area of red that's overlapping my tree right here. And I'm going to flip-flop the color of my brush. Now let me show you this. The color that your brush is automatically assigned is shown down here at the bottom of your toolbar, denoted by a black and white square. What it shows you in Photoshop down here is actually the square that shows on top right here, which is black right now, is your foreground color. That's your main color you paint with. And then behind it is a secondary color or background color that you can use or flip to at any time that you wish to start painting with that color instead, which is great for people who are working in digital painting also. But we're going to use it here to flip between black and white, which is what we need for masking. Remember, black blocks out imagery, and white reveals it. So for our purposes, with this red showing here, I need to get rid of that red so that I can reveal more of the tree. So the color we need to use for that is white. So to switch these two colors, you can do it one of two ways. You can either you can hit the X key. Notice when I hit X, these two colors flip. Or you can hit this little double arrow that's right above them, and it will do the same thing. Now let's make sure that white is on top. And let's come out here over our image and very slowly and very carefully click and drag your mouse down over that area. Notice how, as you do that, the red goes away wherever you draw with it. Pretty handy, huh? Now this is a great tool to know how to use. Now, one thing we do need to pay attention to as we use it, because right now what it's doing is it's adding or revealing parts of the tree that were previously covered up. What we may need to notice, like as you start learning to use these tools, is that hard and soft edge. If I go up here to my brush options and click on the brush options right here, the hardness factor does affect how well the selection will look later when it's cut out. When you're cutting out an object that has a hard edge line like this tree does, I tend to want my hardness up around 100%, which makes a very hard line. So if I click and drag this now, it should make a fairly hard line across here. Now, the good news is that if I mess up at any time, it's okay. You can just hit X so that you have black on top, so you can paint with black to go and add more of that mask back over the top of your tree to block out imagery. And that'll just help keep that contained a little better for you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to identify places around the tree, and we're just going to very carefully go around switching between our black and white using the X key, and also adjusting our brush size with the open and close brackets so that we make a very accurate selection from our tree. Now remember, if you need to navigate your screen up or down, you can hold down space to temporarily engage the navigation move glove, and then you can let go of space and then work. So again, you can kind of see like where I'm working here. Like I'm trying to guess like what I did in places where I can't see. So I can see that I just revealed branches that I didn't want. So that's okay. Just flip to the black by hitting X and paint back over them. And again, when you're doing this stage, you want to do it very carefully, or as careful as you can, so that you're not cutting off something important in your design. And so again, I'm just kind of quickly going around looking for places. Now, do not try to sketch in these little branches. You will be sitting here for hours on end. There are better ways to do that I will show you later. But for now, we're just going to go around the things that have definite long, broad edges to them that need cleaning up. So again, I'm going across and looking, making sure there's no white haloing around the edge of my cutout. That is the worst thing you can have. There's a little area right there. Just wanted to cover that up. And there's a little area, whoops, flip to X. Cover that up right in there. And this is a process that takes time. That's what makes those image cutouts that we see, or those sort of movie posters or even digital art that looks really clean and really well put together. Like, how did they make that scene? It all started with doing stuff like this. And those artists took their time to cut these things out. Now, there might be places like this where you see like a random hole of white. You could actually come in and paint red inside that area. Now, as they get smaller, it does get harder to paint like this. Freeform, you do need to use a much smaller brush. So again, having that memorized using those open and close bracket keys can certainly come in handy for this part of the process. And again, when you use a small brush size, it does take longer to fill in broad areas, so if you're able to use a broader brush, go for it. Yeah, and I do that every now and then. If it looks like it's a major area that has lots of white that's probably not going to get picked up or blocked out any other way in the design process, then I might go ahead and try to cut those in just a little bit. Nothing real fancy right now. When you're working on your own image, of course, you want to look for those things and make sure they're taken care of appropriately. Again, by blocking them out and adding them towards your regular mask for your whole design. And that's one way to do it. And this is kind of nitpicking a little bit on it, but we'll leave it be right there. And that's actually pretty good for this selection. Now, what we'll want to do now is actually work through by updating this selection. So now that we're done with our quick mask on here, if you like what you've done, you can hit the same icon to switch your mask off and it will update your regular selection. And so now your regular selection should include any changes that you made while working in the quick mask. So you can see like I added these areas right here. My tree trunk selection is much cleaner now where I went and updated. So we're looking a lot better now. But now that you've updated it, you do need to resave your selection so that you do not lose this if you exit the program. So I would suggest going back to select from the top menu, hit save selection, and go select your tree mask and leave the operation on replace channel. That way that it just updates it and say OK. And that channel will be updated. All right, so now we got our tree dealt with. Let's turn off its selection by hitting Command D. Turn off the tree, and let's move on to the water layer. All right, so this is what we're going to do with the water layer. The water layer, we need to cut off only part of this image, right? We have the selection set, so we're going to reactivate it. So let's go to Select, Load. We need Water Mask. Say OK. There's our water mask. Now let's hit Q if you want to. Let's kind of interchange and learn different ways to do things here. So let's turn on our mask by hitting the Q key on our keyboard this time. And so now we can see the cutout, just like we did with the tree. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm just going to look across my horizon line to make sure things look pretty good. There's probably not much we need to do with this, actually. If your horizon line looks like mine, where you cut it off just below that line of mountains, you don't want to cut off your horizon above the horizon line and have mountains included. We don't want that in our final work because we want to get rid of that landscape back there for later. And what we'll do is we will actually have clouds showing in this upper half region. All right, so there's nothing we really needed to do with this. Let's hit Q again on the keyboard and Command D to deselect it, or you can go up to Select and use Deselect. We'll turn off water. And let's go down to rocks. I think this is the only other one we need to correct, which is great. So let's zoom in quite a bit, and let's go to Select from our top menu, and Load Selection, and go to Rocks. OK, there's our rock selection back up. Let's hit Q on the keyboard to turn our quick mask back on. All right, there's that lovely red overlay, so we're doing good if you can see that on screen. If you can't, remember you can hit Q to turn it on. Quick mask only works, just as a reminder, it only works if you have an active little selection dotted around an object. If you don't, this isn't going to do anything. There won't be anything visible on screen, no red. So if you turn on the quick mask and you notice nothing changes color, it's because you don't have an active selection on screen and you need to go up and load your selection. Okay? All right. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to go into Refine. So I'm going to zoom back in. Again, work up close when doing this stage. Never work far, far away like this. You can't really see details very effectively, and you could end up erasing parts that you would rather want to keep to make it look clean and accurate. Always zoom in and be up close. That's the professional perspective on that, and how they work to get those great looking images. All right. So now that we're zoomed in, I'm going to go ahead and start painting in over these areas, and I need to make sure that I'm painting with black because I want to add to the selection. I missed my rocks a little bit out here. paint in a little bit. And again, you may have to adjust the size of your brush because you're working with a shape that is in the shape of something that's very rigid. And your brush tends to make a very round shape if you're not careful, which can look very unnatural on something like this. So you may need to work with a tinier brush shape to get the effect you're looking for. Again, we're doing the same thing we did with that tree. Navigate your screen. Don't forget you can navigate it up by holding spacebar temporarily to drag your screen up if you need to. Again, go around the rock faces very carefully, looking for haloing, right? So that's like where there's outside outlines from the sky showing up around the selection you're trying to cut out or object. And so I'm going in very carefully looking for white sky that might be showing on my image. And there's a part of rock that was cut off, so I'm just going to bring that back very carefully with white. Flip back to black. Obviously when I did this selection, it was a little more sloppy, a little bit faster. We were trying to just work through it and just kind of quickly show you what to do, but this is the stage where you clean things up. Working with compositing is always a multi-stage or multi-pass kind of effort. So you can never really do it and hope to get like the best results the first time that you chisel away at it. If you do, congrats. That means that you have a very good eye for what you're doing, and you can do pretty good knockoff selections the first time, and that's awesome. Not many people can do that, so you can pat yourself on the back for that. All right, but we're going to keep working through this. Now, for the rest of us, we'll keep working through this to get it right and cleaning it up. And even pros have to come in and do stuff like this to make sure it's accurate the first time. Otherwise, they could end up with a very sloppy-looking selection. If you're someone who's proficient or knows how to use a tablet or stylus, like the Wacom tablets, those are excellent for processes like this, where you're doing heavy-level compositing. That tool is definitely built and designed for doing cutout work and doing digital painting and compositing, editing photographs, and those kinds of things. An excellent tool for this. I highly recommend it, and definitely recommend that you try using one. If you're someone who thinks you might use this in your professional area, please do. They offer, if you're a student, take advantage of discounts while you still can. They are out there and plentiful. All right, now that we've done the cutout work on this one, let's get out of Quick Mask, hit Q, and let's update our mask selection. So let's go to Select and resave it. Change your channel. Make sure you select the right mask. This is why it's important to name things. Rocks mask. Replace it. Okay. Now we're updated. All right. So now you've worked through the second part of the process with this project, where we loaded up our selections and we used the Quick Mask tool to update them and refine them ever so slightly. And the next time we get together with the next video, we will actually work on further using what's called a Refine Edge tool to go in and just make sure there aren't any hairline sort of adjustments that we need to make with a mask, as well as converting those into what are called layer-based masks to finish out the edit process at this point. All right, I'll see you next time. Take care.